Ready. Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, September 5th, 2023, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I'm Chairman John Hastings presiding, and also present are Commissioners Grant Simmons, Mose Dunkel, Amelia Boyd, Ben McGran, and Wayne Benner. Commissioner Slate Camp is absent this evening. And if everyone will please stand, we will recite the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any general announcements from commissioners this evening? No. Okay, and from staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the hearing on the comprehensive plan at City Council is scheduled for October 4th. And there will be a special City Council meeting on September 27th. And the sole subject of that meeting will be the Bonner County rezone public hearing.
Thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda is approval of meeting minutes from last meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes from the August 15th, 2023 regular meeting.
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? And I'm abstaining as I was not here. The next item on tonight's agenda is public hearing and the possible recommendation on a preliminary plat, city application number PS3-0003. A notice of public hearing was published in the Bonner County Daily Bee, the city's newspaper of record, on August 15th, 2023. I will now recite the order and procedure for the public hearing. An explanation of the subject of the hearing by city staff, followed by a presentation by the applicant, and then opening of the public hearing, at which time the public may provide testimony, and then we'll close the public hearing and the commission will deliberate. No new information may be provided after the hearing has been closed, with questions directed only to city staff during deliberation. For the record, any written comments received were included in the meeting packet or otherwise provided to the commission. I appreciate your continued patience as we work through all this information and notes. For the record, and at this time, I would like to ask for your specific attention as I recite the city's general rules for participation during public meetings. Public comment opportunities during meetings are for comments only. Do not direct any questions to the commission or to staff, and do not approach the dais. Also, now that the meeting is underway, please do not approach the clerk or other staff up here at the front tables, as this disrupts the meeting. You may inquire of staff in the back of the room who can provide assistance if needed. Remarks shall be addressed to the commission as a whole and not to any single member. The person speaking shall face and address only the commission and shall not turn and address staff or members of the audience. Members of the public are asked to please exercise self-control, to participate in our meeting in an orderly manner, and to focus on the specific issues at hand and avoid personalizing debate. Those speaking shall not make personal, impertinent, slanderous, or profane remarks to any member of the commission, staff, or the public. Disorderly or boisterous conduct, including loud, threatening, or abusive language, whistling, speaking out of turn, clapping, or other similar acts which disturb, disrupt, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of the meeting is not allowed. We will proceed with this item, starting with an introduction of the application by city staff, followed by an explanation of the request by the applicant. Please note that commissioners should address their questions to applicant at that time. I will now ask for confirmation from each commissioner that you have had no ex parte contact and that you have no conflict of interest pertaining to this request. Commissioner Benner?
I have none.
Commissioner McGran?
No.
Commissioner Boyd?
No.
Nor have I. Commissioner Hastings? Commissioner Dunkel?
No. None.
Thank you. And I will now yield the floor to City Planner Amy Tweeten for an introduction of this request and explanation of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first agenda or item on the agenda is the public hearing on subdivision 230003 West Point Place. Hang on, I just had to get this to work with me. Okay, there we go. All right. There we go. The applicant, West Point Plaza Development, is requesting preliminary plat approval to divide a approximately 4.3 acre lot into 4 lots in the commercial C district. The property is shown on the map. One lot would retain the existing warehouse buildings in the southwest corner. And those are non-conforming uses. And then the remainder is proposed for multifamily residential development, which is a permitted use in the commercial C district. The proposed preliminary plat, all the lots do comply with the commercial C district requirements. The property, as shown here, has access to Ontario Street, Division Avenue, and US Highway 2. Traffic impact analysis on the proposed multifamily development is currently under review. And utility easements and plans will be reviewed further in detail at the time of infrastructure permit application prior to final plat. You'll see there were a few conditions of approval related to that. Again, this is being 4 lots. This isn't typically something that the commission would see, but because this was part of a previous short plat, it's replatting a short plat. So that's why it's needs review by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council as a full subdivision. Based on review of the materials, staff is recommending 5 conditions of approval. The first is that public infrastructure, including the sanitary sewer and water, be installed to serve all the lots in the preliminary plat prior to final plat. A stormwater management plan based on development plans submitted by the applicant shall be approved by the city engineer prior to final plat. And the stormwater management plan may be modified at the time of building permit submittal on any lot to accommodate changes in the proposed development. That there are approved CCNRs are approved by the city and recorded for ongoing maintenance of the stormwater system prior to final plat. That the traffic impact study that is currently underway is completed and approved by ITD for any possible off-site impact fees. And that vacation of the existing water sewer easement and creation of a new easement of no less than 30 feet centered over utility lines once the sewer main is relocated. And just to explain what is meant by that, on this drawing, you'll see there is an existing easement that runs north-south. Part of it is 30 feet, part of it is not. And our understanding from utility plans that have been submitted is they aren't necessarily centered in that easement. That's what often happens when easements are recorded too early in the planning process. So we just want to make sure that when really the only one that's being moved is the sewer line that currently cuts at an angle that will be placed in this north-south direction. But given the need for separation from all the utilities, we need a full 30 feet, and we just want to make sure that easement is accurately represented on the final plat over the utilities once they're in place. And that is all I have as an overview.
Okay, thank you much. The commissioners have any questions for staff at this time?
Not at this time. I have some questions, but not at this time.
Okay.
Sure.
Mr. McGran, yes.
Amy, do we have where the current utilities are at?
Yeah.
You're asking that we're gonna
The-
separate out and feed each lot individually. Do we know where they're coming in currently?
They won't be separated. They'll be in this general, these are mains that serve these lots that go, and those utilities are in place. The only one that gets changed is this one at an angle. That's where the sewer comes in now. So that is to get located in this north-south direction, that easement will be vacated. And we just want to make sure that the long-term easement is centered over the utilities that are in this general vicinity.
Okay, but maybe I'm confused. Are you saying as a condition of approval that you would require the utilities to be stubbed at each lot?
No, the mains will be, the mains need to be put in place so that all these lots have access to,
Right. So do we know where the existing mains are at?
on the utility plan, it does show, yes.
Okay, is that in the packet or?
I believe it was in the applicant materials.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners' questions for staff? Okay. With that, then I will now yield the floor for the applicant's presentation. If the applicant's representative will please step to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hi,
Hi.
nice to meet you guys. Scott Darnell, applicant. I believe the city summarized perfectly the project. Our engineer is in here. I didn't know if you were coordinating a little funny, but I think that she nailed it. If I can field any questions if you like, or I can sit back down, you tell me.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? I have one I think that I'll bring up, and that is just when we looked at the three potential accesses to, Division, Ontario and Highway 2. Are you thinking that all three of those will be maintained to whatever comes into this new area?
Yes,
Okay, because the one to Division is not really a street, is it?
No, it's an access easement.
Access easement?
Yep.
Okay, and that would remain similar to what it is now?
Correct. It's, let's see, this will, and actually what
Yeah.
I'll do is pull up.
It's the one that's the main access into the bank and kind of a secondary access to the little mall that's up there as well.
Let's see, I have a larger version of the plat here. Might make it a little easier to see. So this is that access easement that goes off into Division.
Gotcha. And does any changes need to happen to that if it is considered? Does it need to be up to the code of what a city street needs to be or not necessarily? Okay,
It's already an existing access point.
gotcha. Okay. Commissioners, any other?
I have a
Yes,
question.
Commissioner Boyd.
So, it said in the reading that projected up to 17 buildings with 6 units each. So is that still the plan?
Yes.
About 102 multifamily apartments?
yes.
Any other commissioners? Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now prepare to proceed to the public hearing. If you're participating on Zoom, do we have anybody participating on Zoom?
Yes, we do.
Okay, doke. And if you wish to speak, then you will need a working microphone on your phone or computer. When your name is called, you will see a prompt on your screen asking if you would like to unmute, and you will need to unmute yourself in order to be heard. As announced earlier, those here in chambers who would like to speak will need to complete a sign-up form available on the table by the door where you came in, and you can hand it to staff in the rear of the room here. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. City policy provides that the presiding officer may allow time to be gifted during the public hearing, and I will allow this option this evening. If you are present here in the room and would like to gift your time to someone else who is also present here, you may do so. The person gifting their time may do so only once, and the person receiving gifted time may receive only one gift for a total time of up to 6 minutes. If you are gifted time, please state as much when you approach the dais. And the public hearing is now open. Madam Clerk, can you please call our first person to testify?
Give me 1 second to open the
Okay.
timer. Apologies. If any participants on Zoom would like to speak during the public hearing, could you please raise your hand at this time? Okay, it doesn't appear that any Zoom attendees would like to speak.
Okay, thank you. Do we have speakers in the room?
Yes, we do.
Okey doke.
Norris Board,
Good evening, Norris Boyd, no relation to the commissioner. I'm a landowner at 1209 Ontario, which is right across the street from this site. And I have a single family home on Mackey's Way, which again is very close to this site. I'd like to caution the commissioners and the staff to review any stormwater plans on this particular site very, very carefully. We have significant problems back there. I've got on 1209 Ontario, we've got a duck pond in the spring. When I looked at the plans that were in the package that was available online, I did not see any geotechnical studies concerning the absorption, and the plan appears to me to look for on-site retention of the stormwater. And that in that particular area, to me, needs to be studied very, very carefully. So when this comes up again, you'll see me again concerned about the stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean Gonsalves,
Hello, Sean Gonsalves. I'm a facilities manager with Mountain West Bank, and I think one of the acts, I think Commissioner John Hastings, you brought up the access off of Division. I guess that would be our concern too. The use of, I had talked to some, I think there's something going on to the south of us. I talked to somebody, maybe we can communicate at some point to open that up a bit, because there's an island there that may not need to be there, but again, during the plan phase, maybe we can figure something out and exchange information. But I think our biggest concern was just the parking. I know the original vision for West Point Place was pretty big 15, 20 years ago when we acquired this building. Our employees use a lot of the parking. Would that be to the east? And we're gonna, apparently from one of the drawings, is not part of our property anyways, but for a building that size, I guess we're just concerned. We already have issues with parking, and then we have high school kids parking there, and then I don't know, one parking space available for each tenant or each of these apartment units. And, nights and weekends, it may not be an issue, but, just to have, we also have tenants in that building too, dentists and doctors and so on. Another one of our concerns. And the other thing maybe we can chat about is we're losing the dumpster enclosure that was part of the original, that whole plaza at one time. So not only where are we going to put our trash, but how is the like waste management going to access that dumpster? And then, once this is done, and I think they can't, is it the ambulance? Is that what's being done to the south of us? It's like is that a county thing? I remember, I think they're working on that now, but I talked to somebody about that, but we're pretty easy, but maybe at some point after this is all done or in motion, we can start looking at maybe ways to get creative in our own parking spot and maybe work with an engineer to maybe add some additional to the property that we own, but that's I guess another story. But I think just being here, I think that's it, right? Yeah. The big thing is parking. And we're just concerned about parking in that road to the south of us. Like you said, how busy is it really going to be? And I think if we maybe modified it, it would be easier for access. Because if you look there's like an island there and some kind of like some wasted space. I think it would help both the complex that's being built and then also the building to the south of us. That's all.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
If anyone on Zoom would like to speak during this public hearing, please raise your hand at this time. Last call. There are no other individuals that would like to speak either in the room or on Zoom.
Okay, and I'll throw it out there one more time. Anybody else here that wants to speak? Okay. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions at this time?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, is
Commissioner Simmons.
the concerns relative to sort of the division access, is that normally picked up in like the traffic study?
Yes,
Is that where that gets sort of flagged as
that
terms
gets
of
reviewed through the
if
traffic
there's any
impact study.
mitigation that has to happen?
Right.
What about like how far down on, let's say Ontario, like how far does that traffic study go? Meaning like traffic on Ontario itself will increase quite a bit.
The
like-
traffic impact
Yeah, how
study
do you do
looks
that?
at the site and the different access points to the site and how they will get impacted.
Got it.
And then makes recommendations primarily, and then it is sent to ITD in case, because this site does abut the highway.
Mhm.
In case they see extraordinary impacts on the US 2 and intersections.
Well, so that'll be their major concern would be that ITD corridor.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have a question too. At this time, is the bank building fully occupied? I'm just considering the parking thing.
I do not know.
It is not fully occupied, and that would be, even now, we are Scott, the East Branch manager, it's a battle. We're dealing with the strip mall. And I think, again, the original, you guys are probably, I don't know if you remember the plan from 20 years ago. The vision for that court was totally different. And I think there was a time that there was going to be enough parking for everybody. So it is some of our tenants, I think we'll probably end up losing some of our, I think we're already in the process of losing because the parking's an issue.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Well, I would just, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to follow up on the transportation part of it, that it's going to ITD for their review, but isn't the city also going to be reviewing that transportation?
Yes.
Okay, study,
Yeah.
okay.
The traffic impact study is reviewed by our traffic engineer, Farron Pierce. They also send it to ITD because of where the site is located.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, commissioners, any questions? No.
I think
Commissioner McGrath?
my question on the conditions of approval, it states the preliminary plat will expire in 2 years if not submitted unless an extension is granted, which cannot exceed 1 year. So basically we're giving them 3 years. Is that, because that's not just to complete the project, complete the buildings, we're just saying the plat.
Correct. This is for, those are just conditions of approval for completing the plat. And that comes directly from code.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that the concerns that have been brought up have been addressed within the conditions of approval that are outlined here. Stormwater management and the parking piece is noted as something that has to be reviewed at the time of final plat, so I think that our conditions of approval here are addressing the concerns brought forth.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Brenner.
the stormwater one does actually kind of bother me a little bit because they're looking at on-site. And it is correct that that stormwater runs off of there and on down through the residential areas and actually floods a couple of the roads down there for a period of time. So I don't know whether that stormwater shouldn't be looked at in a little broader sense than just strictly right on the site, but also what the impacts are going to be to the adjoining neighbors and all the way basically down to the sewage treatment plant.
Well, I think that that's part of the analysis, right? Is that does the site have to have on-site stormwater management plan, or can it utilize the existing pathways to transfer water, right? I think that's,
Yeah, I just want to make
that's
sure.
the analysis that needs to happen and determine if an on-site water retention pond needs to be established.
Any other questions? If not, I will close the public hearing. And no new information may be provided and questions may be directed only to the city staff during our deliberations. And I have one question for city staff as we begin that, and that is the existing pond that is there. Is that on property belonging to the church? Because I know that there already is a wetland there, and I don't know if that's something that can be accessed through this potential development, or is that, who does that property belong to?
First, it's not a designated wetland. It is land that
It is a
wet.
functional wetland, even if it's not designated.
And that the area that's retaining the water primarily is on this property, not on the church property. But we do know that there are issues between the two sites, and that is, how does the water that is coming off of the church property, or how does what happens to the stormwater on this site impact what is going onto it? So it is a complicated stormwater area. And that is why we want to make sure, particularly with having a new staff engineer, that he is comfortable that the stormwater will be handled and not make the situation worse downstream. We can't say it's going to solve all the issues downstream that currently exist, but to not make them worse.
Commissioners, deliberations, any thoughts? Are we ready to entertain motions at this point?
I think so, probably.
Pardon?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. I would accept that.
Did I just volunteer myself?
I believe you did. We can check the notes. Did he just volunteer? I think he did.
All right. I move the Planning and Zoning Commission, after consideration of the criteria and relevant standard of Idaho Code and Sandpoint City Code, recommend the Sandpoint City Council approve the request by West Point Plaza Development LLC for the West Point Place 4-lot subdivision of parcel RPS 376800104A on the north side of Ontario Street, south of US Highway 2 between Division Avenue and Olive Avenue, subject to the following conditions. 1, public infrastructure, including sanitary, sewer, and water, shall be installed to serve all lots prior to the final plat. 2, a stormwater management plan based on development plans submitted by the applicant shall be approved by the city engineer prior to final plat. The stormwater management plan may be modified at the time of building permit submittal on any lot to accommodate changes in proposed development. 3, city approved and recorded CCNRs for ongoing maintenance of the stormwater system prior to final plat. 4, the traffic impact study is completed and approved by ITD for any possible off-site impact fees. 5, vacation of the existing water sewer easement and creation of a new easement of no less than 30 feet centered over utility lines once the sewer main is relocated. Based on evidence, records, and testimony, the reasons for recommending approval with conditions are: 1, staff has followed the notice of procedures applicable to subdivisions contained in Sandpoint City Code Title 9, Chapter 9. 2, based on information presented at the hearing and placement of limitations through conditions, the applicant is compliant with Title 10 subdivision and Title 9 zoning, specifically 9-2 commercial zoning districts. And 3, the proposed subdivision is consistent with overall planning goals and objectives.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of the motion in front of us? I have one, and I'll just entertain this out as a possible amendment to the conditions of approval, and you can tell me if you're thinking something you would want to look at. It sounds like we certainly have some interest in people in the room here that are involved in this project. That as another condition of approval, it would be that the applicant consult with the neighboring property owners on developing a more broad wastewater management plan. And that doesn't have any implications, any requirements to it, just that they'll consult with the neighbors to see if they can come up with a plan that will help everybody.
Mr. Chair, who would facilitate that? Because it feels like it sort of gets out of the.
I would imagine the city engineer, but
That does raise a little bit of a red flag from my
Okay.
perspective, because there's just no way to monitor that. And it's also requiring them to engage with another private entity,
okay,
not the city. So I don't know if that's a wise condition. of
all right,
approval.
that's why I brought it up as a potential.
But neighbors should chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I'll-
Yeah, I heard you saying.
Okay, so we won't make that amendment. Any other discussions on the motion in front of us? Okay, we will do a roll call vote on that. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Hastings,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunkel,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
Yes.
Commissioner McGrann,
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Benner,
Yes.
motion passes.
Motion passes. Indeed, it does. All right. Thank you all very much. The next item on tonight's agenda is discussion and direction on proposed code changes related to mobile vending. And I will now yield the floor to City Planner Amy Tweeten for background and an overview of code amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, so this is a code change that staff's been talking about for quite some time. And that is just mobile vending in general and where it falls in the code for regulation. And what I've relayed here is where it currently falls or where it has historically been regulated under and how it has been interpreted. And as you can see there, it's not the clearest regulation of whether a food truck falls under the accessory or ancillary type. So to try to clarify, so we have people that come in that want to do mobile vending and it's all, okay, where are you going? What's the principal use? So we would like to clean this up and make it clearer for both staff and applicants. So we are proposing two different changes moving ahead. One would be to create a new section of business licensing dealing exclusively with mobile vending. And then look back at this 9219B that talks about accessory uses and what that's really trying to regulate is that outdoor displays. But it really isn't in this location working well in general for mobile vending. Sarah did research what other communities are doing. This is a table of the communities we have looked at, and across the board, mobile vending is regulated through business licensing. And then there's other requirements, whether it's health department, fire code, you know, which districts do allow them, don't allow them. So that part is zoning, just are they only allowed in commercial industrial districts or are they allowed in residential districts on private property? Those are all things that we would need to work through. But as a start, just wanted to get the commission's input on whether this is a move that you would support.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioners, yes,
Yeah.
Commissioner Benner.
you're talking about food vending only or all types of vending? A mobile trailer going around selling hoses or
Right, yeah, we have some interesting situations that come up, like we have a mobile dog wash.
Yeah.
And so those are all things we're gonna have to look at.
Okay.
But primarily the questions we get are for food trucks.
okay.
But how we regulate those other kind of, you know, whether it's I'm trying to think of another one that we get questioned about.
The ice cream
Like-
truck that goes
The
around.
ice cream truck or the car detailing that goes to somebody's house. So those are all things that probably do belong in business license. I mean, they probably get their business licenses now, but there aren't specific regulations. So that's what we want to address.
So you're thinking that the kind of code you're talking about developing would include those sorts of businesses as well, not just
Yeah.
food trucks,
Well, a big part of what we need to look at are definitions.
but gotcha.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So
Commissioner
then,
Boyd.
Amy, you'll have a section for, you know, mobile type vending where they offer a service and then hopefully a separate section for food vending for food trucks, because there's different things you have,
Right.
you know,
yeah,
different requirements.
exactly.
So it won't be lumped in together. It will be clear and concise for those that are looking into.
Right, because the food vending has, you know, whether it's they need extinguishers to put out fires, they have health department
Right.
regulations, so yeah, those will be different
Okay.
sections.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner McGrann.
So in our proposed zoning that we're looking at is where would a mobile vending be prohibited?
I don't know that it'll be prohibited. It'd probably be most restricted in residential districts, but that's not to say, you know, if someone had a private party and they wanted to have a food truck cater it, as long as they weren't providing food to the general public, maybe that is something we'd allow on private property. Right now, this section of accessory uses falls in the commercial districts, but in reality, food trucks make all kinds of sense to allow in industrial districts. If a food truck wanted to go to a business with a lot of employees, or as long as the business agreed to have the food truck show up at the lunch hour, it makes all the sense in the world. So it's really probably just the residential districts that we would restrict. But again, we are going to do a survey as part of this because we know there is, historically, there's been sensitivity downtown. I think a lot of that has been overcome just by what has occurred, but we are going to reach out and make sure we get some input from the public and businesses on if there are places they absolutely don't want these to be located.
So that would be a zoning update. What
It wouldn't be-
allowed uses within
Right,
zoning?
it may just be noted in the use table, but it would be regulated through business licensing. So when someone applied, you just have to make sure that they were operating only in certain districts.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of having a neighborhood block party and having a food truck there is something that we would want to be able to maintain that option for, like temporary use type of thing.
Right, and that's more of like a public event. So as part of a public event, as long as the event sponsor wants to say the streets are blocked, maybe in that situation, we allow a food truck on public property. But a food truck that's just driving around town probably would need to be located on private property, not just in a parking spot vending from the food truck.
A comment I remember when we had, they're no longer in business, but when we had a mobile coffee shop. And I know the stipulation that they had said is that they couldn't go set up business anywhere. But if somebody called them and said, I would like a coffee, bring it here, then they could stay there as long as there was people buying coffee from them. You probably were not here at that time, but.
No.
Anybody else remember that? I remember that because whenever I had field trips, I'd tell them I want a coffee here at this time, and they would show up, and then all the kids would buy coffee, but including mine. So, but I'm just that was an interesting stipulation, is that it was a mobile latte coffee shop, and she couldn't just show up and open her door, but she could show up if somebody wanted a coffee, and then she didn't have to leave. She could stay there as long as people were buying coffee, which is an interesting thing. Is that in the city code anywhere? Does anybody know? Or was that just part of the license she got to do it?
I think that's not legal.
You think it's not legal?
I think I know those people and complained about it.
Just curious.
Right now, you can't.
That's my knee-jerk reaction as well.
Okie dokie.
As of right now, there's mobile vending is not legal, right?
No, it's not that it's not legal. It's just, every time someone wants to operate, it's a question. Is it allowed here? Is it ancillary? Is it so? For an example, in downtown, McDuff's, 219, who don't have full kitchens, food trucks are considered ancillary to that use. But if you were a retailer who you don't have any business with food or beverage, then it would be an accessory use and you'd have to get a conditional use permit. So like Misty Mountain is a good example of that. The food truck court was a CUP, obviously, because that is a use that has multiple trucks.
Gotcha.
So
And those were considered permanent, not temporary.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, those are all the definitions. Are you a mobile unit? Are you a food court? What are all the different provisions? And maybe we only want a limited number of locations that have them on a permanent basis that aren't like a Misty Mountain situation.
I guess my thoughts are that, yes, enough questions have been brought up here that it is something that needs to be clarified. It is something that we need to work on. And by looking at head bobs, do we see that from most everybody? Because all we're looking for now is, are we in agreement that there should be,
right,
that you all should proceed with that and then bring something to us, and then we can look at the details and massage.
right.
So I
Yep.
think it appears.
This isn't a public hearing.
Correct.
I mean, if you want to take public comment, I think that you certainly have that.
I always like to take public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Planning Commission, Jeremy Grimm for the record, former Planning Commission. I wrote that code and I was
Tell me about
here.
that mobile coffee shop. No.
There was a lot of issues. I should also say, future candidate for mayor of Sandpoint. So I tend to, when I was planning director, to approach regulations from perspective as, is this a problem? Do we need to address it? And how do we address it with like this touch? It's my own philosophical perspective. In this case, there was a gas station in the proximity of Larch and Fifth that was selling everything from puppies to frisbees to big blanket displays. And we were like, you're a gas station, you can have outdoor sales, but if it's the blankets one day and puppies the next and bulk mulch the next, this is getting out of control. So that's why we developed and implemented that, as it had to be accessory to, the actual business. And then secondarily, for the food vending, we found that, these mobile vendors were popping up everywhere and they create a lot of demand. So sometimes you have traffic flow issues, turning issues, they'll park in a blind intersection. So we required the CUP to make sure that they had appropriate site plans and turning radiuses and flows and things to that effect. So it just seemed like a way to manage it that gave us a lot more kind of checks and balances. But overall, I'd say generally, I haven't heard the actual problems. I like to not look for solutions in search of a problem. I like to hear what the problems have been, what the issues have been, and then address it from that perspective. So I would just ask that you ask staff to try to identify what have the conflicts and the issues been, other than interpretation. Like, are there actual problems with the sound people coming to my car on my driveway and putting in a speaker, or detailing my car, or putting in a new windshield? Because I generally think there should be less regulation, and but certainly regulation to prevent problems if there are problems. So thanks for hearing my perspective, and good luck with that one. It's
Thank you.
sticky wicket.
Thank you for your perspective, historical perspective.
If-
But yeah,
if I
yes.
may, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyd.
So Amy, there's just been a lot of confusion with this code with people, with vendors trying to do a food truck or some sort of whatever it is they have, correct?
Right, yeah, and in all situations, is a CUP the solution? Again, this is something that in most other communities is handled through business licensing. That seems where it's appropriate. There may be situations where CUPs are necessary, and it's not to say that without a CUP, we wouldn't look at location, parking, all of those requirements. It's just whether a conditional use permit is necessary for all food trucks to be more or less permanent at a location.
So this is just to clean it up and put it in its appropriate spot.
Right.
And I think it is a benefit to the public, so that when somebody's interested in doing something like this, they know where to go. What title, what chapter am I looking under, and where do I go to get this approved?
Which just seems to make sense. It should be under licensing or business and.
Well, I think that's what I'm saying. There currently
Yeah.
isn't a chapter to address it, so
Right.
we would develop that. And I would think when you're talking about the CUP versus, part of that might be the number of days. I mean, if this is here for a couple of days, obviously it's not a CUP. If you're going to be there for more than half the year, then maybe it is a CUP,
Right.
but to have that stuff cleaned up so the public would know, a business person who wants to do this would know where to begin the process.
And with the CUP, you always have to follow up on the conditions. We're still trying to unravel the conditions that were placed on the Oak Street food truck lot, and make sure those are being followed up on. So we just want it to be where it's easiest for people to know what they need to do to comply. And out of every situation be unique.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner. Grant.
So a conditional use permit, do all conditional use permits have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yes, they do.
So if I'm a food truck operator and I want to stay at some place for 6 months, I have to do a conditional use, I have to do a conditional use permit, submit that, it has to go through planning and zoning, and then that's it, or does it have to go to city council?
It's just planning and zoning.
Okay.
And generally it's the property owner who would apply for the CUP wanting to have a food truck on their property.
Okay. Does it right now outline time durations? Like if it's going to be more than a week or 2 weeks or a month that you have to have a CUP, or?
It doesn't. The CUPs each have their own conditions, so they're all somewhat unique.
Okay.
And yeah, we had approved the one, as you said, by Misty Mountain, and that was
Right.
for 2 food trucks. So they don't need to come before us anymore. That's done.
Right.
We also had approved one at the corner of Cedar and First, although the food truck that went in there was very short-lived. And there's nothing there now. That whole lot is kind of waiting development.
Right.
But that was another place they wouldn't have to come before us because that had already been approved.
Right.
That
Okay.
they could go in a spot like that. So there's at least 2.
Where's that one? First and
First in Cedar, it's all fenced off now,
Oh, gotcha.
right next to, what's it called? Grace and
Joy.
Joy.
Got it.
Thank you.
Tracy.
It was another fun word. But I couldn't remember it. I was gonna go Grace and Hope. I was close. Okay.
Well, it's,
Head nod if we'd like to see staff spend some time investing on this.
yes, it seems to make sense.
Yeah, it's not a formal vote. It's not a formal anything. That'll come later after we see what kinds of suggestions come before us.
We don't want to mess with lemonade stands though.
Sorry,
Lemonade
Lemonade
stand for kids.
for
We're
children.
not gonna mess with those.
We,
Don't happen.
no,
That's
we don't
bad
want to mess
PR.
with that.
Very bad PR.
Very bad PR.
Don't mention those.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that I noticed in what you said there before, it said like fireworks stands and Christmas trees were exempt from
Right,
applying for this sort of stuff because they were traditional seasonal things, which is interesting.
right. So I had actually asked because the fireworks showed up at Super when I was like, what? And that was just handled through a business license.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah, food for thought, maybe lemonade stands or seasonal summer should be exempt for the kiddos. Idea.
yeah, again, it's probably that's probably not a problem needing a solution. So unless they set up in the middle of the street or something. Okay. Yeah, we think it's a good idea to clean some of that up and give potential vendors clarity on how to begin their process.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on tonight's agenda is continued discussion and direction on code amendments to accessory structures. The commission has received some written comments on this agenda item in advance of the meeting from architect Reed Weber and Molly Riley. And I will now yield the floor to city planner Amy Tweeten for an overview of the code changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we keep trying to move this forward and understand the direction of the commission. So direction's been given on concerns regarding height, size, design compatibility, and setbacks, in particular on corner lots. At the last meeting, there was discussion on maximum size at 700 square feet. And then reduction of that square footage if it was above a detached garage. So I am hoping I understood what the commission was saying, and this table is trying to reflect. So if the maximum gross square foot is 700 square foot for a detached single story, then if it's above a detached garage, it can only be 75% of the area of the detached garage, not to exceed 700 square feet. So I just came up with some size 24 by 24 foot garage would be 576 square feet. 75% of that would be a 432 square foot ADU above that garage. And then similarly, 720 square foot garage, the detached ADU would be 540 square foot. And I didn't get to the point of how big how to max out the upper floor of 700 square feet, but I just wanted to make sure, was that the intent of 75% was of the garage on the ground floor?
That's how I
So-
interpreted.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can you pull up the attachment? Because I think we need to put this in perspective from a picture standpoint, right? And so there's some examples of some cottages that are in the presentation package.
Yeah.
So for example, the first one on Walnut Street Cottages, we're saying that the current ADU setup there would not be allowed because we're saying that it's great. It's more than 75% of the floor unit.
Let me just get, that's on the, okay, this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I feel like this is fine. And I don't necessarily know why we would limit somebody to say you can only put something on top of a second story that has to be 75% of the first floor unit. Because I mean, if you look through all of these, they're all pretty much following the footprint of the foundation floor.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Simmons.
So it feels like we're trying to solve a couple different things within this notion of square footage. And a lot of the other things haven't been addressed, and really appreciate you having sent sort of this feedback along. I think it's all pretty good. One of the ideas that had come up that I would like to potentially bring up again would be the incentivization of a single story ADU. Potentially allowing it to be 900 square feet, and then as you scale up, getting to our 1.5 to 2 story, that's where we start to scale back with a not to exceed. Then if we want to keep 700, that was thrown out last meeting. But is that making sense? Is that
So you're saying,
incentivization of a single story ADU would be
right,
yeah, we would allow 900 square feet, and then if you go above, you have to scale down. But I hear what you're saying relative to the footprint of the underlying structure. We've been provided plenty of examples that I would argue foot the bill, to the extent that I'm an architectural critic, but it seems like we've got a couple different exclusionary things coming in. So what I'd like to do would be, are we comfortable with the max 700-foot ADU? If so, is there an incentivization or some other incentivization to a single story ADU? Because that was one of the things that had been brought up early in this process. And I think we've somewhat gotten away from it.
right. So
Unless I've mischaracterized the entire conversations, which.
if I understand, you're saying if you allow 900 square feet for a single story, but if you go up, the maximum size would be 700 square feet.
Of the above ADU, yeah.
Right, above a garage.
A max, but you could still use the percentage math in terms of scale, but I think we've been provided examples where does that really fit?
I see, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I seem to recall that, I forget how or when the 75% came up. I think it was from Coeur d'Alene, an example of Coeur d'Alene's code. So I thought my interpretation was we were in agreement to the 75% of whatever square footage. At the time, we were going back and forth with different square footages. That was my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And mine as well. One other thing that I might add to the discussion here, though, too, is that from my understanding, this did not arise because we thought we had a problem we had to deal with. It's because the public told us we had a problem and we need to deal with it. It's because the public does not like the size of these units that are being built because they think they're harming the neighborhoods of Sandpoint. So it's not like we were trying to come up with a solution to a non-existent problem. There was a problem. There was public outcry was saying these things are getting too big.
Right,
That's
so
my understanding.
And they're an eyesore.
Pardon?
And
Correct.
yes.
They're destroying neighborhoods at least, or deterring neighborhoods.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner McGrath.
The Coeur d'Alene code is that the ADU shall not exceed 75% of the total square footage of the primary dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Well, that's where that came from.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think that I think the square footage is 700 square feet is great. And I think that providing incentives to do a single level ADU and allowing them to go larger is something that I'd be supportive of.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, and I
Mr.
still,
Simmons.
I think this, and we have a long list of those public comments.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And so I think this probably addresses it to some extent, but what else did we have to sort of satisfy in this?
let's see here.
Or do we have to sort of rework your math a little bit?
All right, so that's the comparison, just the 700 square feet and the 900 where we were originally. And then, let's see here. This is not a great illustration, and I did not use any kind of graphic software, but this was just to try to show some of the dimensions and the location, because the issue is ensuring they're in the rear yard, not the current code says it will be behind, but behind is not defined. So now it clearly says it has to be in the rear yard. The challenge then becomes corner lots. And there was discussion of how far back on a secondary street. So if you look at the upper and lower right, so this house is facing street B, so it's facing the street. If its ADU is so its rear yard is behind it, is to the left. Then how far setback is far enough to be behind on that secondary street frontage? So here's an example. This isn't to scale either, I'll just tell you that.
This is good.
You keep
This is-
apologizing.
This is back 5 feet, but I'm gonna show you an example of what that looks like. Here's an example of a single-story house with a 2-story ADU. The front of the house is on Spruce Street, so the ADU is in the rear yard. And it is also about 5 feet, at least from the posts are about, they might be set back slightly, but let me see if I can. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to zoom in on this for you. But you see from the secondary street, it looks like it's right in line. Is that not enough? Is 5 feet not enough? I'll also show you from,
Hey, Mr. Chair, ask questions. Hey, Amy, real quick,
Yep.
on that one, super dumb question, but that has a porch on it. And so a porch isn't included with the setback as a structure? Because the setback was gobbled up by the porch itself.
right, well, and this is going to show it even
What the heck, I
better.
guess, in this case.
So the house is actually, if that's the front or the sidewalk, the corner front or secondary front is on Ella.
We're not seeing it,
We're not
by the
seeing
way,
it.
right now.
Sorry?
You're
It's not on our
Oh, sorry.
You're sharing one away.
So now it's not gonna let me figure out, but the wall of the structure is more than 5 feet set back. But as you saw from the street view, it looks like it's right in line.
Right.
If we had said it needed to be behind, if it needed to be in the rear yard in both street frontages, it would have to be tucked back here. Because this is the rear yard from the front. And if this is the rear yard, this line from the house back would mean the ADU would have to be in this location
Gotcha.
on a corner lot. And this is a big corner lot, so most lots don't have that amount of room to work with. But there was discussion last week about 15 feet or 20 feet. I just don't know what, the interest of the commission is on how far back that secondary street setback should be.
Can we just say that it needs to be behind the principal structure?
I think you're gonna want to give some kind of a dimension. Because behind the facade, is that a foot back from that building wall? Is it 5 feet from the building wall?
Well, I think it has to do with the entry point, right? Like if your garage entry is on, like for this example here, right? Their garage entry is on Ella
Right.
and they're behind the principal structure and they're 25 feet off of Ella.
Right.
If I may, just for clarity, and I think you were asking about that earlier, but we wanted to get away from that word behind. And that's because there's a lot of homes in Sandpoint, I know, because I deliver flowers all day long. They're on this street, but their door is not. It's somewhere else. It's here, it's there. I don't know where to find their front door. But so that's why we were defining it as the street they're located on, not necessarily where's their front door, because that could be anywhere. But so we were defining that it's not behind from the front door. It's relative to the street that they're addressed to. And that's why corner lots were a special issue, because they have two streets. But they still would be addressed to one or the
But they're
other.
addressed to one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the street you're addressed to is your primary street and you
Right.
have to be
Yeah.
behind that structure.
Right, but all the examples we have that people have concerns with are these corner lots, because when you're not on an alley and you're on a corner, the ADU is that much more visible, and and this one's got a presence. It almost looks like its own house, like it could be its own house, except it doesn't have a pedestrian entry on the front. So currently the language has that on the secondary frontage, or we're gonna have to define how, so this is their front. This is either their corner front yard or their secondary front yard. Right now, we're saying your ADU has to be set back at least 5 feet from this building wall on your secondary street. It still would, and that it also, if it's got that vehicle entrance, has to be 25 feet from the property line.
And are you aware of any examples where that almost makes it prohibitive to build an ADU because of some of those?
I'm sure they exist.
But nothing's come before you or anything at this point.
No. Mm-mm. So let's see here. I wanted to go. So that other discussion, and I don't know that we ever reached a consensus. I kind of, in the staff report, proposed a compromise on a 2-story detached ADU having a greater side yard setback than a 1-story ADU. But again, you could have an attached ADU or a house addition that is still 2 stories and is allowed to be 5 feet. So are you disincentivizing detached ADUs? Again, I know we're trying to incentivize 1-story, but is the bigger concern if that ADU gets to be out of proportion with the primary structure, then you need to increase your side yard. So if your ADU now gets to be taller than the principal structure, you have to increase your setback 1 foot for every foot taller than the principal structure the ADU is, or is it half a foot or some proportion, just to get it to have less impact on the neighboring properties.
And I do think that would help accomplish that, and that would help accomplish some of the concerns we see from citizens, that if it is a larger mass, then it has to set further back.
Yeah, as you go up, you have to move back. Yeah. I don't know what that right math is on that.
I don't know either. And we may want to start conservatively, because a foot for every foot taller than the principal structure may start to make it, well, again, it would incentivize people doing single story
Yeah.
because it may not be feasible to do a 2-story ADU. If you start having to move in on your side yard setbacks. So we're not saying you can't do it, we're just making it more restrictive if that's, not every lot can support a 2-story ADU. Let's see. Then we, last time Heather gave us the presentation on the recommendations of the Arts, Culture and Historic Preservation Commission to incorporate 6 design features to ensure compatibility with Sandpoint's residential character, which include a gabled or hip roof, eaves of no, it was significant eaves, I think was the language I just put in, of no less than 1 foot, front-facing windows, a covered pedestrian entrance, facing the public way, contrasting trim, and wood or similar composite material. And then 2nd floor windows facing abutting lots, utilize appropriate materials to maintain privacy of abutting properties if placed at the minimum setback. This is the one that you received comments from an architect. Heather wanted to expand a little bit on the importance of this and how it doesn't necessarily eliminate modern architecture. Yes, I will stop sharing and you may take over.
Thank you. I really appreciated the feedback and comments that you guys had in the last meeting. And so my commission and I went down a little bit of the proverbial rabbit hole and really wanted to understand the 6-pack, which I think Commissioner Camp fondly names. So now it's official. We're branding it. Okay, so the 6-pack, we talk about gabled hip roof, the eaves, front-facing windows, the porch, contrasting trim, wooden similar composite material. This is a really neat, on my commission, we have Commissioner Barry Burgess, and he's a retired architect. So he went ahead and put together some sketches of what that 6-pack would look like. And this is the idea of like that traditional kind of bungalow chameleon style with those 6 characteristics here. And number 1 is the roof, 2 are the eaves, 3 front facing windows, 4 would be that porch, portico or trellis, 5 is the contrasting trim, 6 wood or similar composite materials. And this is a 600 square foot ADU that he put together. And you can see it has a lot of more, your traditional features, and he did add some great, trim details and so forth. Now, this is his example of a contemporary ADU with the same exact 600 square foot ADU. And it was really fascinating. So we still have the same roof design, but then the portico, the eaves here and here are more contemporary. They're less of a hip style and more of a straight style. This is an idea of having kind of a glass front garage here. The railing has more of a contemporary feel for cable, and then being able to take different widths of wood and mix up that material there. I mean, it's still wood or wood-like, but it's different widths. You could also take and do 2 different colors if you wanted to. But, and then the windows also had less of that cottage style and more of a modern feel to it. So it's definitely a way to give a twist. And just as a reminder, I'm a historian. The commission and myself and the commission is also filled with historians. We're not trying to dictate style, but when the community comes to us, and we're also working out of our adopted master plan, and they say we want to preserve the historic residential character, we went down deep and went into all of the surveys that have been done on all of our residential neighborhoods with the State Historic Preservation Office. And we've created pattern books, and we've identified that these 6 characteristics are key characteristics that blend in with all the different styles that this is the little floor plan we put together too. But that we've gone down, which is sorry, let me see here. When we did this fun slideshow, right? Like these are the characteristics, which are the foundation and the chameleon, which you can put with a lavish home, more of a modern minimalist home, new, historic, rancher. They truly are, the foundation of all of our history. And so I went back into history and I studied shed roofs and full metal buildings. And I really came up with things like, if we're talking from a historical standpoint, tool sheds for shed roofs, outhouses, more of your basic structural buildings, but nothing within residential. I also did the deep dive of metal materials, and those were always on commercial buildings back when you're looking from a historical standpoint. So then I thought, let's expand our thinking and think about like the idea of a gabled roof. And in the 1970s, the clear story style was introduced. And this is a play on a gabled roof, which is certainly more modern. And we do have 70s infill around here. And this was the way that 70s felt like this would be really cutting edge. And by allowing light in when they did that split roof, it had the house become more of a sustainable style. And I do believe that this style is reminiscent of a lot of the different styles that you're seeing here. But really, the shed roof is a truly current trend. And along with full metal. And what we need to really remember with trends is that they come and go. And the idea and the goal would be to create a resilient style that's celebrating our past as we move forward into the future. And it's in terms of my master plan, complementing our historic vernacular that we currently have, and making sure that we're encouraging preservation and rehabilitation too, according to the Arts, Culture, and Historic Master Plan. So it's about finding kind of that sweet spot with design. We certainly don't want to inhibit people from having their own self-expression, but we can, as historians, go back and say, this is the major housing stock of our history, and dial back to those 6 historic styles. So I just wanted to share this with you because I felt like it was kind of an interesting concept that we all came up with. So let me know if you have any questions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Brand.
So I don't believe that this is the right place within the ADU code to be dictating design characteristics. I feel if we want to do that, I think that it should be more the primary structure that we should be dictating to in certain neighborhoods. Then I go back to the ADU needs to complement the primary structure and align with that. I would be against putting these into the code and making people go contrasting trim colors, for example.
And that was the intent, right? That these were addressing ADUs and not primary structures.
Currently, this is accessory structures, yes.
Other discussions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mr.
relative
Simmons.
to Mr. Weber's feedback, is there, his thesis here is there's some functional elements that are these would be in violation of, and he's like, still, hey, look, these are great examples. And his suggestion is pulling together, the folks, as he puts it, who will be held responsible for the following and upholding them, which would be the homeowners, architects, developers, and builders. Meaning, I guess to what extent has there been like architectural development input around like
Mhm.
fitting the preservation to the function of the primary to the other chairman's point or to the other commissioner's point?
Absolutely. And I really
Feels like
appreciate it.
that's where it's at.
Yeah, that feedback that he put forth, but I didn't understand the backing to his examples. I felt like it was more subjective, like when he's saying these are the Sandpoint style,
Super.
which is such
yeah.
a subjective thing. So that's where I go back again to our history. And when people are wanting the commission and myself to define what is our historic vernacular, I can tell you in my surveys that are done from a history standpoint that this is what, you know, are the consistent characteristics, and dialed down. These are, you know, the key things that are easy to accomplish. And we're seeing, you know, today, and that complement a house back in the 1900s, the 1930s, 1950s, and so forth. And on my commission, we have 9 individuals, and we make up a combination of what meets the Secretary of Standards for preservation. So that means that we have an architect historian, we have an anthropologist, we have an actual historian. Our commission is really rare because we actually meet all of the standards, and most commissions of communities don't. So I believe that we have the professionals that can make the qualified recommendations for this.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess my comment was more towards the fact of using that horsepower pointed at the primary residences.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
this is the start personally, and I think that you guys are working really hard to build the foundation, which would be easy to plug into other codes if that is something that you're interested in doing, because we are hearing this from the community in terms of preserving our historic residential character from an ADU standpoint and from a residential standpoint too. So it's something to consider.
Gotcha. So it's being focused more on ADUs now because that's sort of like, there's lots happening now and let's get on it.
Yeah, I think it's a great
Yeah.
test run for this. Go ahead and take care of that. It's one of our community character moments. But yeah, we were so excited with my commission to be able to have this conversation with you all and give any input and recommendation too. And this just came up organically because you guys were reviewing the ADU code, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I hear it from the community left and right about the commentary of new development happening and how they struggle with how it makes sense with the history amongst where they're propping up. So as a historian, and this is my recommendation, along with the recommendation, of course, this is the commission's recommendation from, excuse me.
And again, the commission started out with the ADU needed to be compatible with the existing structure. And it was, I think the Coeur d'Alene language was windows, materials, something else. But because there is such an increased interest in ADUs, and we were talking about the code, that is why the Arts, Culture, Historic Preservation Commission, because what is community character? So they took the time to really, from an architectural standpoint, to try to define that and distill it down to these 6 basic criteria. So that's where we are on that component.
I can go ahead and stop sharing here.
Okay.
Actually, before you do, oh, never mind.
No,
Not a
I
big
can.
deal.
It just takes a second.
No, that's okay. I get my only comment was going to be when you mentioned like in the 1970s, there was that little bit of a change to allow that upper level skylights. That was done in the name of sustainability. I would certainly not want to see anything put into this that would make it more difficult to build modern sustainable structures. Because if it becomes necessary, you're trying to build a historical looking structure, will that limit my ability to make it passive solar or anything else like that? Because that's kind of that 1970s style. That was a lot of that passive solar is what that was And I'd hate to see a developer lose the ability to do that because it doesn't look historical.
And that's where I thought that was fun to find that moment in the 70s, and it's still a gabled roof. And it's a more modern, all you're doing is a little and adding some windows, which allowed for, and which really goes back to what we're doing now, because I think a lot of the contemporary build that we're seeing with the trend, we're finding it kind of is an influence off of maybe the 70s. But the other thing to think about when I was having a discussion with my commission, if you want to be more sustainable in terms of heating and so forth, think about that size and having that sweet spot of maybe that box, which is a 600 square foot size potentially. And that way, if you have a square, it's less to heat, you add more windows, it generates more light. If you're thinking from a solar sustainability aspect, there's a lot of advantages with that square footage, where all of a sudden with 900 square feet, your size and scale changes. But that would be up to the homeowner. But there's some really positive talking points about scale and sustainability. So keeping that in mind, when we talk about gable, it's not necessarily something people can be creative. And I think sometimes when you give people a set of parameters that they have to work out of, it really pushes them from a creative standpoint, from an artful standpoint, where, you're going to see some really cool stuff happen where, maybe it's the gable that goes like this, or a hip and a gable mix. But again, those all still fit when they're sitting next to these other roof lanes that are hip and gable in these neighborhoods.
So Heather, why don't you address that in the primary architecture of the primary dwelling unit versus?
I'd love to, and I hope we can get there.
I think it's because we're working on ADUs.
Yeah,
And it's
I just think
surprising.
it's the wrong place for it, my perspective.
We got a few.
So Commissioner, it's up to the commission whether or not to allow public comment. I think we've already made the exception once, but that being said, there is a time for public comment, and that can be at the end and in the future at least. I think the best way to do it is to have this conversation with staff, hear staff, make your call, and then, because this is coming back for another hearing later, let public give their comment during the public comment period. But again, it's certainly the commission's decision.
Commissioner, what do you think? We do have public comment coming up on the agenda. Do you want it to be here while we're on this topic, or do you want it to be coming at the end?
I prefer at the end. That's just me.
At the end of the night.
Okay, so you'll get your chance at the end. All right.
Right, so I guess before we get to public comment, if we could just go through, so this is, again, we keep trying to move forward on how ultimately would the code look. So on this one F, this is where we're talking about the corner lot, is the text that's highlighted. So on a corner lot, a detached accessory structure shall set back no less than 5 feet from the wall of the principal structure facing the secondary street frontage. That would only be in the event it's also 25 feet back. So that's in another section of this code, but you still have on G, it's accessory structure with street facing vehicle entrance shall be placed no less than 25 feet from the street facing property line. I believe there was consensus on the commission that the height of an accessory structure should not exceed 1.5 times the principal structure, or 26 feet, whichever is less. The change of use, again, this is if you have an existing accessory structure that doesn't meet setbacks, you don't automatically get to turn it into another dwelling unit, because now maybe it was a garage, but now it's a dwelling. It will need to meet the provisions, ultimate provisions of what this section has. Let's see, other highlighted. this is where, I guess the discussion tonight started. Was the maximum area of a single-story accessory dwelling unit may not exceed 700 square feet gross area, including habitable and non-habitable space. Then there's the question, does that include stairway or exclude stairway? And then a second-story ADU shall not exceed 75% of the accessory structure it is above, not to exceed 700 square feet gross area, including habitable and non-habitable space. Where the discussion this evening started was perhaps the 900 square feet for a single, or are we at 700 square feet for a single story ADU? I guess that's one thing we want to resolve is a single story ADU maximum gross area.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, my thought
Mr.
on that
Simmons.
was unless we want to get into prescribing bedrooms, room number, and getting to the parking business, it's the one thing we would have to incentivize a single story structure. In that you could have pretty solid quarters, single story, and then it scales down as you go up. So that would be my sort of 2 cents on that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
I
Grant.
would be fine with that too. I would think that if we go back to the size limitation of 75% of the principal structure, I think that that helps balance. So, for example, if we said you could have a 900 square foot ADU, your primary residence would at least have to be 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
So I think that that starts to get the scale to shape appropriately. If you have 1,000 square foot primary residence, then you could only have a 7,500 square foot ADU.
So 75% is in relation to the principal structure, gross area, habitable and non-habitable.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say that,
Well, if I may.
Yeah.
We're talking ground level. We're not saying 75% of total square footage. We're saying 75% of ground level square footage, are we not?
no, I think that you would be 75% of total gross square footage.
So if you had a 2-story, 2,000 square foot, you could have a
You could have a
1-story.
900 square
What?
foot.
No, because the 900
You
max.
cap
The 900
it at
max,
nine- you cap it at some number.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
Yeah,
900,
900
maybe
cap.
right. Okay.
But yeah, I think this like inhabitable, habitable access, the stairway, I think that gets in a lot of gray, and I would just say that that's all included, right? Like
Well,
700 square
spelling
feet
it out
includes.
is important.
So yeah, I
because-
would want to include that includes everything, right?
Okay.
Correct, because that's the only way it'll have an impact on overall mass,
Right.
to make it more agreeable with the existing structures.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Boyd.
I strongly agree of the 700 square feet. I like this 75% of the second story. That is where I stand.
700 square feet
Max.
instead of
Yeah.
900.
Yeah.
Instead of 900.
Well, I mean, you have houses that are 900 square feet, right? So why does an ADU have to be as big as a house? The whole idea is to have something that is smaller, more manageable, lower maintenance, hopefully cheaper, more affordable. It doesn't make sense to me to offer an ADU at the same size of a lot of houses in Sandpoint, if I'm correct.
Absolutely.
And I think I would share that sentiment. I don't know what the number might be. I don't know, 700 or
Right, it could be,
something in between those two numbers.
Right.
But I agree with the sentiment, that's for sure.
I think 900 is excessive.
Mr. Chair, I'm
Mr.
in
Bennett.
that same page, basically, yeah. I think that 900 is excessive. I mean, no matter what, especially when you get into some of these neighborhoods where you do have, smaller lots, but you're going to try to put a 900 square foot home on there or ADU. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you though, I think about like elderly living quarters with having to have extra space for the disabled dad, like 900 doesn't go that far when you've got a parent who needs some help, is one opinion.
And along the same, I mean, when I was thinking like my house, which is a 2-story house, it's about 900 square feet on each level.
Yeah.
And to turn that, if that main level was the only living space, it's more than adequate. It's more than adequate. You'd have to rearrange the floor plan a little bit, but that's way more than enough space.
I have a under 700 square foot ADU. And it is, I had to live in there for a few months with my husband and our little dog while our house, the main house, was being renovated, and it was more than plenty of space for the two of us. And the
Well,
dog.
And where the 900 square
wheelchair,
feet
though.
came from is because that's what the county allowed.
Correct.
So it's nice that we want to be consistent, but lots in the county are very different than lots in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we're looking for a lever to pull to incentivize a single story
Mhm.
ADU, right? So if you look at it from that approach, a single story ADU does a 30 by 30 footprint if the lot allows it with the setbacks. I mean, it has to be allowed within the setbacks, right? I mean, if
And
it's a
lot
small
coverage.
lot
Yeah.
and you can't make 30 by 30 fit, then you can't do it.
Right.
But if you have the lot size and the opportunity to do it, I think it's a good incentive to provide to people to say, you can do a single story ADU and it can be bigger.
I think last meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think last meeting we talked about the setbacks were the key to limiting the size of the single story. And then if we limit the second story and if we just get away from the percentage and just say a certain square footage, maybe that's a better way to look at it, or maybe not. But I lean pretty heavy towards 700 being fairly large for an accessory dwelling. My mom happens to live in a 540 square foot accessory dwelling behind my sister's house, and it's surprisingly roomy. But it is just one person living in there. But if you added another 160 square feet, I think 2 people would have no problem, or maybe even 3. You could definitely make it 2-bedroom. I think as a single level, that's still quite a bit, but then again, if we like that setback on, especially on the corner lots, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way or how much manipulation we have to do to the setbacks to make it where, we're not going to end up with 900 square feet on just a few larger lots in town. Because I kind of agree, if you have a huge lot, 700 square feet isn't really doing anything comparative to the size of the lot. So I don't know about how many big, huge lots are there and how many of them are looking to build extra dwellings. So it's probably a small amount of people that we're actually impacting. And I think the point is we're trying to make it a single level that isn't huge, or if it's this 2-story, that it doesn't look like a box, right? Even though the ones we looked at were boxes that everybody doesn't have a problem with, I guess. But they're pretty boxy, but they're really small too. 410 square feet is, it's enough. So maybe that's kind of an indication of, when they get real small, then people don't care as much about what they look like, I guess.
I'm gonna summarize briefly if I can, and slap me when I'm wrong. No, but so when you're looking for direction, I think we can see the consensus is, and we don't know exactly what the numbers are. We're going to look to our professionals for that. But we generally want to see something smaller. We think we want to incentivize single story by whatever means that is, if that's a setback thing or square footage thing, but to incentivize a single story, doesn't eliminate a second story, but it incentivizes a single story dwelling. And is there a consensus that the number 900 is too big, or is that?
Sounds sort of like it. And I
I
honestly.
mean, it kind of sounded like it, perhaps with.
Well, I have no idea, like, in terms of the reality of the situation of how many units could build with the setbacks of 900 square foot, single story thing.
Correct.
I don't know if that's in the dozens or the,
Right. How many lots would accommodate
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. So, in terms of it's not a hill I'm gonna die on. I was looking for a way to incentivize single story at the end of the day.
And-
900, you get somebody with a wheelchair in there, I think it changed the equation a little bit, but again, that's not the use case. It's a corner case at best, so.
And then the other thing is that we certainly respect the historical nature of our neighborhoods, and we want to see that enhanced and preserved.
Reflected.
So if when you
So let's just look
Staff.
at some of these again. Some existing ones. So these ADUs are 400 square feet. These are on original lots of records. These are 25 feet wide. This is 657 square feet above a 657 square foot garage. The footprint's not as big as the house. This ADU is 586 above a 780 square foot garage. $567 top and bottom.
And that's detached, isn't it? I'm not.
Yep, these are all detached.
Gotcha.
Yep. I don't have any illustrations of attached ADUs.
Where do those two sit relative to each other?
You're
Right,
at the street, you see the house,
Yeah.
the ADU is on the alley.
On the
You
alley
can't-
facing
yeah.
back, gotcha.
Let's see, here's,
We're
the
familiar.
ADU is almost 900 square feet and the garage is 1120.
And that is a classic example of a corner lot and what.
That's the classic corner lot example, right?
Yeah.
And it is, the building wall is behind the wall of the house, but just barely. But we didn't have, and again, the front is actually cedar, so it is in the rear yard. So there isn't anything actually that says, if there was a door here, it would have to be back 25 feet, but the door is off the alley. The vehicle entrance is off the alley.
Yikes.
And so that,
What is that? Okay. Yeah.
So Amy,
And
the
that
way
was
your,
just shy of 900 square feet, just for comparisons there.
the way your code is written, it would be that would have to be 5 feet back from the.
from the secondary, right?
Which is
So
Boyer.
it'd have to be, this would have to be a minimum of 5 feet if there weren't a vehicle entrance here.
So wouldn't that limit the size
Yeah, it would have.
because of the back or the side yard? It's right on the setback, right?
Right, yep. Yeah, it would limit it,
It'd still get 900 though,
yeah.
Okay.
but it might not look as wild.
Well, and let's just picture this. A little Eve moment, right? And then the little trellis portico to break up that structure. And if we added maybe wood or wood similar material instead of all metal, that's amazing what relief that would bring. And it would almost give it a heart and a soul. Right?
I love that.
Just a thought. Okay.
And I appreciate that, although I do want
I
to also
do
make
too.
the statement that the more metal we can incorporate, the more fire resiliency we'll have in this community. So I do not want to be down talking metal in any way, shape, or form, because that will prevent catastrophic wildfire from taking over our community or minimizing the event.
Or all brick.
Or all brick, definitely. Stucco, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I like that. Brilliant.
So this one, I can't read. Let's see if I can zoom in enough. See what the square footage is. The ADU is 650, the garage is 702. So there are a lot of ADUs that are less than 700 square feet.
Mr. Chair, maybe we should lower that down to 600 then, just to be consistent.
In the university subdivision, I don't know if they're technically ADUs because they're part of the house, but there's accessory units that are.
Yes, there are
400.
some attached,
Yeah.
and I can find that information out. Give that as an example.
Yeah, they're 400. Which is
Hmm.
small, but it's like, you know, it's for one or two people probably.
Right. And, historically, those mill houses that connected to the Humbird Lumber Company were about 500 square feet and full families were living in that. And in terms of, incentives too, staff is certainly, and Amy, you can speak to this more, but looking at different ways to help the community incentivize programs for ADU like library with design plans that are free to use and for the community and in different ways that we can help support people that are looking to build an ADU that can be more cost effective for them, because I think that's the goal is affordability.
Mm.
And so when you're looking at size, I mean, that's something to think about. A 500 square foot one would be probably much easier to build than a 900. So and easier to heat and all of those things. So it's kind of fun to like go back to basics with thinking about what they did in the 1900s, and they did it pretty well.
One thing I would add to the discussion too, and that is that I think part of the motivation, a big part of the motivation to go to the 900 when that switch happened was in the name of affordability. And affordability is important, but it's almost become too central to to some of our discussions sometimes, because we're seeing now that that's having a negative impact on other parts of our neighborhoods. We certainly have to be aware of that and do whatever we can to encourage affordability, but it can't be the only consideration. Okay, what else do you need from us?
Let's see. Just making sure. So I'm not sure where we are in terms of
Numbers?
design standards.
Oh,
Does anybody, I mean, when we talk about square footage, do we have numbers in mind different than the numbers currently in front of us?
I mean, I'm fine with the 700 square feet.
Like 700.
But but is it not also, wasn't there incentivized? It can be 900 if it's single.
Well, there is an incentivization to single. I mean, it's the one point you could have a 700 foot. As you go up, it gets smaller. So.
Okay, so we think that's
That's
built
good.
in
I
well
think
enough?
that's a good incentive.
That's-
Yeah.
That's built in well enough. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I missed that.
Yeah, I missed that too.
So, Amy, if you go back to your scale math relative to a 1.5 to 2 story on how you scale down a 700 foot down to effectively a 400 foot as. it got taller.
Oh, that one.
That's
Okay.
what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
let me see if I can find it.
That's what we're talking about.
so you would guys,
Uh-uh.
so you're talking about taking out, so a second story ADU shall not exceed 75% accessory structure it is above. And then she has added not to exceed 700 square feet gross area. So would you, to incentivize a bigger or the 700 square foot one story, would you strike out the second story to gross 700? Or just keep it at 75%?
I don't know. Yeah.
Because that would be a way to incentivize a one story.
And the other way to incentivize one story was at different setbacks on a one story. So, and particularly then if you have a real small lot, rather than go up.
Because this new code would say you could have a second story, 75%, not to exceed 700 square feet but if we incentivize 700 square feet, single story, then don't we want to exclude the 700 feet second story max?
Yeah, I think we just cap the second story at some number.
600?
Yeah, because then if it is a small lot, they can still, you know, like the row housing we saw with the 400. You know, it's the same exact size as the garage because it's a small lot. It's pretty much as big as they can build. I mean, by the design standards, I don't know if those work, but setbacks and square footage it works, and it's not very big.
Yeah, it was consistent with what's being built.
Were,
What has been
when
built.
those row houses there were built, were they given any kind of setback exceptions?
They would have 5 feet on the outside and only 3 feet on the inside property line.
So they're 6 feet apart.
Right.
And without that, then they're even smaller. They have 10 feet of unusable lot or unbuildable lot. So they have 15-foot wide garages instead. Now they have, well, the outside ones have a little less.
All right, so I think I'm hearing 700 square feet. And just
But
to
we're
go,
having a hard time wrapping our brains around the notion of getting smaller as you go up. Meaning, do we even?
well,
address that?
I had heard 700 and for a 1-story, 600 above.
Not to exceed a 600.
Not to
That's
exceed.
fine.
And if those numbers are realistic with design,
Yeah.
and I'm not an expert in that field right now.
Well, from her chart, it looks like you can, right? Those are average garage sizes.
Yeah, I mean,
that
a
you
24
pulled.
by 24 garage could be a 2-car garage. Now, we know people don't park 2 cars in 2-car garages, but that is a pretty standard 2-car garage. So if we just said the maximum on an upper story would be 600 square feet instead of going the 75%,
Right.
you could certainly do that.
I like that.
Although, no, you couldn't really because your footprint is only
Yeah.
576 square feet on a 24 by 24.
We're capped by the end a little bit. Yeah.
Well, you can still go 600 square feet because you can still have overhang up there for the second story.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be a living area.
Well, no, you
Could-
could build a
You could.
block
Yeah.
area over
Uh-huh.
there. As long as setbacks allow.
So that is further direction on size. You still want us to get back to design features? that
Yeah,
correct?
and I just want to confirm, we are not regulating bedrooms. We are staying with parking as it currently is, which means the house has to have 1 parking spot, the ADU has to have 1 parking spot. I think those were the main ones, but yeah, so really the direction is, what is the direction on design?
So on the parking piece, could we incentivize a single story ADU by eliminating the parking requirement?
You could, that seemed to be the biggest neighborhood concern with the ADUs was parking.
But we've reduced the size. So in theory, there should be more space for parking anyway, right?
On-site parking.
Because
right.
we've dropped it 200 square feet,
True.
which is
That-
1 space.
If you want to eliminate, that's fine. The discussion previously was, we don't think that we want to remove it.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to remove it. I think we need to keep the parking.
I have the same sentiment.
Well, I think it does, just food for thought, it does incentivize ADUs. That is another step towards them being affordable.
True.
And since we've limited the size, we've made a concession for the parking. Instead of just removing parking, keeping it at 900, we've reduced the size. And made the exception that parking isn't as big a factor, so is a smaller ADU gonna need more parking? You know, I think that was one of the comments, was that, let's say the ADU got down to where it was only 150 square feet, the chances of them needing a parking space are even lower, right? So the bigger we get, the more need there is gonna be for parking. They probably need 3 spaces if it's 900 or bigger. So 700, 1 space is, I mean, is probably not even enough for 700, but if we're trying to make that single story the goal, we're almost telling them they have to build a second story just because of the parking thing. That's the comment that keeps coming up, right?
Right, yeah. But it doesn't have to be a covered parking
Yeah.
space. Could be a parking space next to the ADU.
Well,
It's not saying you have to have a garage.
can that be outlined in this too then, to point that out so that people don't just automatically go towards?
Well,
"Hey, you have
I
to
mean,
be
it's that
covered"?
way on principal residences.
Yeah.
We don't say you have to have a garage. We just have to say you have to have 1 off-street parking space for the house. But that's certainly something if you want to incentivize single story ADUs by not requiring parking space, we can do that.
I go either way.
And is that what you were saying?
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, I disagree on that because I don't think it incentivizes and eliminates the need for parking, because when you think of having an ADU and having tenants back there, you want to give them the convenience of parking. I mean, I think of where my tenants would park. They would probably park in front of my house and have to walk around or walk through my yard. So I think for a convenience sake for the tenants, 1 parking space is doable on a 50-foot lot. If you have a 700 square foot ADU, I have 3 parking spaces back there. And I have a 50-foot lot and it's almost 700 square foot ADU. So it is doable.
What if it's a really small, like, what if it's like 250 square feet? Is there a size where the parking requirement goes away? Like, what I'm saying is.
I mean, you
maybe
still
someone's
run into the
riding a
same
bike.
problem though. I mean, what's the guarantee that somebody living in such a small space just uses a bicycle for?
There's no guarantee that at 900 they're using anything but a bicycle. I mean, we're just assuming
Yeah.
kind of a transportation. thing.
I'm making a recommendation. We don't touch the parking issue right now.
Yeah.
This would be my.
We only have so many hours in the day.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think just when you look at the parking, we're not talking about a lot of money. Load of gravel maybe at the most, and you've got a good parking space because it doesn't have to be covered, doesn't have to be a garage. I mean, and if it's off in an alley, it's right probably alongside. So I think that keeping a parking space just because of the congestion we get on the city streets, snow removal issues. I mean, everybody that I know of has already got a boat parked on the street as well as a camper and a trailer and everything else. And we're just going to add more to it if we take away from parking. So.
Sounds like consensus.
Mhm.
Okay,
Check, got it.
What's next?
Same, okay.
okay. Anything else?
Design.
Those,
Design
any-
guidelines.
Yes,
Oh,
design.
I'll stand on my soapbox that it needs to align with the principal structure.
That what?
Leave it at that.
Oh, okay.
You know, I tend to agree to that. Partially, sorry, Ben. No, I do. It does make sense because you don't want, I've seen this. I've seen the principal structure, look dated, and then the ADU is this beautiful modern thing, and it does not go together whatsoever. And it's an absolute eyesore, even though it's beautiful, it just doesn't, it's not compatible. It doesn't look right, doesn't look good. Yeah, it's subjective, but if we want to keep the charm and the, you know, the whole historical aspect of the principles of structure, you want to kind of keep it in line with it. So I see your point. I do get that.
Although the other side of it that I see is the principal design could be the eyesore.
Mhm.
There's plenty of those.
There is that. You're right.
There's plenty of those,
right
with that,
there.
and there's nothing we can do about that. And I'm saying we should even attempt to doing that, but it could be quite possible that an ADU that is held up to some of these sorts of principles would actually enhance the look of the neighborhood rather than detract from it.
And I like these principles.
I do too.
I like them a lot. But I see both ways.
And commissioners, I just want to mention that we got in this quandary and then I sent you guys all down the historic rabbit hole because originally we needed to define what compatibility meant.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd still have to go back and define what features are you mimicking from that original structure. And those original structures are so different. And that's why I dialed everything, the commission, dialed everything down to those key, because we looked at housing inventory at large, and that's where we landed on those 6. So because there wasn't enough definition originally in the code when you talk about compatibility.
Well,
I think that the part of it is they're not saying that any kind of ADU needs to have these things. They're saying these are the kinds of things that you should look at when you design your home to keep it in touch
but
with the
it
historical
is,
nature.
but to the point in some of our comments, it's getting very specific, contrasting trim, for example. Do we really need to be that specific in saying contrasting trim? I don't think so. I think that it's just the design should align with principal structure. You know, you could say roof pitch, windows, siding as examples.
And it could even say trim,
And trim.
just not
Right.
contrasting colors.
trim.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes, Mr. Renner.
actually had a very interesting conversation with the person that drew these drawings for you on the art tour this last weekend. But looking at the neighborhood over there, for example, of Stidwell area, where all your homes are the 60s prefab home, basically designs, all of them. That means then we could build a ADU looking like just the old 60s, 70s track home.
It would certainly fit with the neighborhood.
Exactly. That's what I meant, was where I was headed is that.
But in terms
that-
of the new build, I would argue that's when we start to apply these principles. Would be my sort of 2 cents.
But that whole neighborhood, that's what you would have over there, is every one of them would look just exactly like that. If you be consistent with what the neighborhood looks like, because there's about, what, 2, 3, 4 blocks of those basic styled homes.
And I do think that the word is not consistent, it's compatible.
Yeah.
So it does not have to look exactly like what's there, but there has to be some nod to the historical nature of that community or that neighborhood.
Commissioners, could we take a look at the 6 pack and maybe lighten them up and just put trim like you're saying and not have contrasting? And, you know, I don't know. Seems like people are having a hard time with the lack of eave, and eave actually protects the house and people during the winter time. That's why houses generally have eaves in this area. I think the porch is a huge one, or portico or some sort of breakup, because it protects people coming in and out, you know, during the winter time or the rain. But it also creates like a welcoming, you know, moment and an idea of where to deliver those flowers, right? So, you know, just things to think about, like, can these be tweaked so people have a better understanding of how to make something compatible?
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, I, with the six pack, I believe you can still do something modern and hope maybe the neighborhood has some modern to it already. And I think you can still hit all these goals. Like that one has wood, so that board and bat siding is wood on the white part, I believe.
Quick question, excuse me for interrupting, or you finish your thought, but I just want to keep it on that picture for a
Yeah.
while, but go ahead, finish your thought.
So this qualifies, right?
Well, this has a shed roof and my suggestion would be with the gable. And this is a modern like shed. This is a modern contemporary, gabled roof. That is a nod to the history of the 70s, which is in our current stock. So this was my, like, an idea of how to make the gable contemporary that would please the individual designing this structure.
And that was my thought on that one. That one doesn't have an eave on the front.
Yeah.
And so that would be considered incompatible because of that.
Yeah. And
if that extended an extra foot, then
Yeah.
it would be compatible, and we think that would significantly enhance the look of that building.
And then also the
This
If-
one has an eve.
What?
There's an eve.
On the
There's an
front?
eve
No,
on the front.
Front facing windows, it's
Mhm.
covered entry. It's just the doors to the side.
which is fine because it has the covered,
Right.
yeah. So it's really, this has a shed roof versus a gable, let's call it a modern gable. But then Commissioner Barry's suggestion would be something like, I think this is close actually to that other one. It just has a different roof line, but that front garage area is so similar to, it's the exact same as this concept here. So this is a box hypothetically with a shed roof and then a roof coming off of here, which has, I've heard the feedback does not fit with the others. So if you just change the roof line, you've arrived.
Yeah, this does not fit in the neighborhood
What about the laundry?
at all. I live next to this house.
We can't control that.
And you notice the garage is not being used for cars?
That's not uncommon.
Yeah.
I can't fit a car in my garage.
Amelia, you're right, across the street. So this is in South Sandpoint and it's just sprinkled, like it's amongst all these historic
Yes.
bungalows, ranchers, and
then this.
this is the feedback. So I'm trying to think of the commission and myself are trying to think about like, what's that wonderful compromise? And I think that this roof line actually would, if you drove by, it still would achieve what that homeowner was looking to do, but it fits within the gable.
This one doesn't have contrasting trim.
Maybe we need to take out that one and not dictate color. Okay, y'all.
Yeah, I think so.
That was, kind of just a friendly suggestion of what the color schemes were for bungalows. And then we're going to have the pattern books too. So people have resources that they can look at that are free design resources of inspiration from our history if they want to do that. But again, these are just education and fun, advocacy, preservation moments.
Well, but you're dictating through code what people.
I'm talking about the pattern book
Okay.
and color.
But then you're dictating through code what you want people to build.
So this is going back to history and defining what compatibility is to historic residential, which is in the master plan that's been adopted in 2021, and what the community is saying in terms of this doesn't fit our historic vernacular. So it's all going back to history and defining what the historic vernacular is, and also achieving some of the actions and the master plan, which was community driven for arts, culture, and historic preservation.
And it's probably daily. I mean, people, for instance, going by that house on a daily basis, it's one of those things that makes you just go, ugh. And I mean, you have to live with that in your neighborhood, and it's an eyesore.
So what about the home that's a little bit further to the east of that? That's the
It's worse.
black.
Oh, I
siding
can pull up.
and-
Do you want me to pull up that one, the all black?
Yeah, I mean,
Red.
we're getting into these examples that, I mean, from a primary structure standpoint, somehow they got through permitting on these. Where I think that, again, the focus should be on the primary structure, not the 80.
So these were built before we had the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Master Plan. And something to think about with trends, they're really brought together by, the market advertising and promoting, and it has to do with the socioeconomic situation too. And so, a lot of design is marketed according to costs of materials and how is it easier to build. And I think that's kind of fun. And it goes back to why we have certain styles, like the Rancher has the prominent garage because it was the advent of the automobile. So you have all these wonderful things. So let's look at this, a lot of what we're seeing in today's world, not picking on this guy, but when you're dealing with an all metal structure, wood is highly expensive, not the price of cedar when it was in the 80s, right? And it is a lot less expensive to build, with a shed roof versus a gable. And it is easier to build a box, so it's more of a building financial sustainable size for the trend, which is fine and wonderful. But is this our historic, does this fit into the history, or is it a current trend? And are we going to be looking at this and thinking that this is timeless, 100 years from now, where the 6-pack can last 100 years because we are building houses today in 2020 that still match the little mill houses that were built in the 1900s.
Mr. Chair. And also a big part of the comp plan. I mean, you read about how it wants to keep, Sandpoint wants to stay historical and our neighborhoods to stay compatible. And I mean, that's a big part. It's a big paragraph that stood out to me in the comp plan. So it's
Right. And it is, and it's very hard, like some of our code currently says, it gives some specifics in this sense and will be compatible with adjacent properties, but this is really trying to say, what does that mean? And it's a lot easier from a code enforcement standpoint than just make it compatible with their houses, because your code, if it's not specific,
Not enforceable if it's not specific.
is not as easy to interpret.
And I think it would make sense in our pre-approved ADU plans to have different plans from local architects that have more of a contemporary feel that they can just have or buy at a very low price, like something like this, that allow, helps give them ideas on how to be creative, because I celebrate individuality and creativity. I do. And I love being a historian. So it's finding that sweet spot, which I think you all can. That's why the commission and myself spent so much time trying to dial back into that 6-pack moment.
So in attempt to move things along, what would be an appropriate course of action between staff and commission here to change the word contrasting to compatible, or to make the 6-pack a 5-pack?
yeah. I personally like the 6-pack, how it is.
With contrasting trim as one of them, because that's not a hang up for you.
No, I think contrasting trim looks nice personally, but that's a personal preference.
I agree. I think I'm on both ends kind of, but since there is a master plan, there is a comp plan, I think this still leaves a lot of room for people to be individually focused on what they want. This definitely doesn't tell them what the look has to be. It just says, if you hit all these things, it's gonna probably not be ugly. Because I think that's kind of the goal, right? Like
Yes.
compatible means it looks good.
It fits within many different styles within.
Well, I mean, I am nervous that like if we narrow it down too much, then, I mean, I obviously like industrial modern. And when I build an ADU, that's what it's gonna look like.
Mhm.
So
We'll see that
Just
little
so you
roof
know,
line like this.
I can do all that with, all this is gonna be in there.
Just do it.
You'll see. But you know, we don't say what colors to use. We don't say what kind of windows. We don't say what the porch has to exactly look like, how big, any of that. So
Lots of
I mean,
options.
you could still build something ugly, I think, but it's, if you have all these things, then at least they
Right.
can say, hey, you know, it's compatible with the other houses in the neighborhood because it has all these features. And they are all appearance based, really. Well, they're functional too, but yeah, the master plan and the comp plan, we do have to identify what that means. So that's, originally when I first saw this, I was definitely very hesitant. Like I was not on board, but I think people can still have flexibility here.
And I definitely want to, with my commission, provide any resources and support that can, and build the plan library that can help people like arrive. And I think that this is fun. And I don't even think of it as a design challenge. I think it pushes them to be more expressive in a way.
Well, I think it's needed too. Like you said, there's a lot of the people in this community that I've spoken to in my neighborhood that just don't like those the tear downs, and then this industrial looking thing is popped up that does not fit in with the character of the neighborhood. And it's important to the residents here that we want to maintain that and maintain that history, or it wouldn't be in the comp plan. And that is, driven by citizen input. So I do think it's important, because I got to tell you, when I read the comp plan for the first time a few years ago, and then seeing these things pop up, and it makes you go, because it just hasn't been regulated, or, they're just being rubber stamped because it's falling within code without really taking an actual look at what these buildings will look like when they're finished. So I do appreciate that. And I do agree with you, Mose. I think there's a lot of wiggle room in here for individuality, for, styles, different styles, and what people want. It's not so limited that, it has to be this way, it has to be that way. These are just guidelines that need to be accomplished in order to be stamped with approval. And it's not something that, if, like you said, if it follows these guidelines and it is ugly, well, city can't say, no, you can't build it because it's ugly. So, I mean, right, it follows within code. So if it does, it will be built.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
just have one last question.
Go ahead.
When building plans are submitted for permit, do you guys get into the details of the colors that are being used?
No.
Okay. So contrasting trim would not be identified on the building permit.
Not currently, no.
Okay.
And another question for you too, the last element there, just where it says wood or wood similar. Does that mean you could not build a house with vinyl siding?
That's correct.
Wood similar looking.
Well, there you go. But we have found too in this area, and I think vinyl siding tends to warp and not survivable. But if there is a new material that makes it to the market, and there are a lot of really durable materials that look like wood. So I think in today's world of synthetics, we've come really far from the vinyl from the 90s that's falling off and warping. But that would be the goal, is something that It doesn't have to be exactly like wood, but something that mimics that.
And my experience is the exact opposite.
Mhm.
I had a wood composite material that warped and fell off.
Mm.
So I had to replace it with vinyl siding.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
That's great to know. Yeah.
vinyl siding is so common and it's an excellent cladding material
Mhm.
that I don't see why we would
Mhm.
exclude it.
Yeah, same thing with metal,
Pardon?
metal.
You're right.
Well, there's metal that looks like wood as well. So if it is wood appearing, it can look like it's 4-inch cedar lap siding.
Mr.
But
Chair.
well, let me finish that one thought if I might first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't even zeroed on that one because most of our discussion has been on the
You're
contrast.
right.
material. But I mean, that would eliminate, well, technically that would eliminate brick, that would eliminate stucco, that would eliminate vinyl, that would eliminate.
Yeah.
And I could not support that in any way.
Oh, and contrasting trim doesn't necessarily mean it has to be painted.
Right.
If you have a brick house and you have wood trim.
But
it's
under this, you
contrasting.
can't have a brick house.
Brick ADU,
Pardon?
a brick ADU.
Correct.
You can have
Brick
brick
ADU.
house, you can have brick ADU.
We don't have neighborhoods with brick houses.
I think you guys are right. Broadening the material would certainly make sense. Again, I was just going back to history from the 1900s to the 1970s.
I'm glad you brought that up because
Mhm.
like you said, I've just totally.
It's that
ignored
contrasting trim.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Oh,
definitely
that's a
think that
good
needs to,
point. That is
yeah.
a really good point, John.
And I don't know what the solution to that is, but that's not the solution.
So this was in response to looking at history to respond to the full metal starkness on a lot of the new builds that are popping up. So that I would think that I think some metal, but all metal, just things to to consider.
How about contrasting material?
That
Because then you could have
absolutely
a variety, not just one, one.
Agreed. Like if this was part metal and then the other
Right.
could be wood, and then that's more of the modern
Or
feel.
even, a brick facade
Mm-hmm.
with whatever that on Pine Street.
Yeah.
That's really attractive, what they did with the burn claw.
You're right. Cause you see, again, like my anchor is history. So most of these have a different foundation with the material. Same here, the detail of the rock work or
Mhm.
brick or metal. Here we go. Here we have the metal, half metal structure, half. So that is a moment of more expression. So here's an idea of contrasting material. So I think that is consistent and it allows them to be more expressive in that regard.
And that will steer them away from just all sheet metal.
All sheet metal. Yeah. And I think that was the main thing that we kept
Yeah.
hearing, and that didn't fit with the history within residential.
Just out of curiosity, if someone was building a single family home in a commercial zone, and maybe that's not even a thing to discuss, but I
Only in
wouldn't,
mixed use residential
pardon?
currently, only in mixed use residential currently.
Correct. But would I be subject to these design standards?
Right now, these are.
Right, I
only-
know, but would
yeah.
I, if I was not building in a single family residential, what I was building in.
Multi-use, yeah.
I mean, and then I wanted an all metal home.
No, because these are only ADU specific.
I know, but the one conversation we've had is that we want to see that expand. I'm just.
I think we're starting little.
Yeah, exactly. This is your test
Yeah.
Okay.
spot, right? And then you can see like, hey, how does the community respond? Like, does this work? Does this accomplish our goals? This is like a good, I think, test run. And then you can see if that makes sense furthermore.
I
So
like it.
I like everything except
Yes, I think a
to limit it
contrasting
to wood
material.
exteriors is not feasible.
I'm still not clear when we're saying contrasting materials. Are we saying
Yeah.
the facade? All facades have to have a minimum of 2 exterior materials?
So, yeah, not solid metal,
I don't know.
I think contrasting actually makes more sense.
contrasting.
Contrasting colors. I think that's actually easier.
And here are your color choices.
I think color is the easiest way to break it up. And different materials that may add.
You know,
of
a lot of it's very big to do monochromatic these days.
Yeah.
Black on black, white on white,
But we've already said that you guys aren't in the color business.
right?
Right. You guys aren't reviewing colors.
That's
No, we aren't
correct.
currently, but if we have contrasting trim,
We're not going to dictate what the contrast of colors is, though.
we're not saying what color, but they're gonna have to show that it's different.
So you are going to look at colors if that's in the code.
If it says contrasting trim, yes, we would.
So it could be stark white and then milky white trim,
That
Yep.
would be-
all white, but
But it's a little hue and the eye can pick up on that, right? So contrasting materials and then see how it goes, like how creative people can be.
Contrasting appearance.
How do we define that?
Again,
Yeah,
I
and I-
think we're just opening ourselves up to continued like deliberation along this. It's just
Yeah.
simplify it. Principal structure sets the design, align, roof pitch, windows, siding.
But
We'll be
then,
here for,
but then you're introducing concepts like this into the neighborhood, which don't fit into the,
well, this isn't an ADU.
Right, no.
This is
but
a primary
say
home.
This is the principal house, so your ADU is gonna look,
yeah,
Of the same
you're
shape.
encouraging more of
non-historical.
non-historic. So you're not
And we're not complying with the comp
Yeah.
plan.
in my plan. Something
Well,
to
if the
consider.
comp plan says that it has to be historic design in nature, then yeah, then we've got it right there. We don't need to have additional code to explicitly state that.
Well, I think we obviously do because
But then we're not applying the code then. If it's in the comp plan that says that your home has to be of historic style, then apply the comp plan to the design.
To be clear, the comp plan's not code.
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, but so then why are we leaning back on it as a way to?
It's why we're going down this path.
It's driving your
It's
decision.
Why we're hearing that we want to keep our neighborhood character, our neighbor. And so this is an attempt at what is it that is the neighborhood character, and what Heather and her commission have done, have looked at residential structures versus commercial structures and what makes them historically, what are the elements of the residential structures that should be carried forward to maintain that historic character?
We're accomplishing the goals from the comp plan because we're implementing the actions from my master plan, and they hired myself a year ago to be and work along with the commission to help define what community character, historic community character is. So this is all new. It's new territory, but this is essentially like I'm the support for defining what the comp plan is saying according to my master plan, which is community driven.
My thoughts is this is a topic that needs to be tabled for another evening. I don't think we're gonna reach any decisions here this evening.
Can you
So
take what we've given you and
I think that's
Chair.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so
Mr. Simmons.
would there be anything else that we could provide that would help you?
let me,
I mean, we're gonna have to come back to these design elements and.
can you stop?
Oh,
sharing?
excuse me.
I just want to make
Is there
sure
anything
that
else
there
we
weren't
could do?
any unanswered questions.
Well, Rome was not built in a day, gentlemen. so.
These are big decisions.
Either with a.
Rome was not built in a day.
We're doing the work.
Is there anything that I can have further conversations with my commission to help support you guys, or maybe come up with different materials that might make sense and kind of help that moment, or?
I think tweaking that wood and
Okay.
wood material, I think is the only thing that we were
Perfect.
talking about. Correct?
I'll make sure to send that to you guys ahead of time so you have time to think about it. And like, as you're driving around, I know I almost lose track because I look at all the different examples out there already, and that might help inform, but you all are aware of what's in our residential areas already.
Question for you, because you did that research.
Mhm.
Because I'm trying to think of a brick house in Sandpoint, and I can think of a stone house, but I can't think of a brick house.
There's two of them, one across the street from me and one right next door, complete brick.
And that,
Yeah.
and likewise,
No, there's-
are there stucco homes in town other than the
There
straw
are.
bale, the newer straw bale?
There's stuccos, and then there's really neat, Amy, you could probably speak to this more, but homes that are, is it concrete with different like glass embedded into it and
Oh, forms of stucco.
forms of
Yeah.
Oh,
stucco?
yes, okay,
And there's
And-
a couple stone
Yeah.
I know, that's what I said, I can think of stone, but I can't.
Yeah.
At any.
in my
So,
neighborhood.
Okay,
yeah, that's a good design challenge. And I'm more than happy to provide you with the different State Historic Preservation Office surveys that have been done so you can see firsthand what our different neighborhoods are comprised of, if that makes sense. So whatever I can do to help you guys and support
So
this.
the one thing I just want to make sure on is corner lots. ADU setback from the wall of the secondary street frontage is 5 feet, again, without a vehicle entrance, is 5 feet enough of a step back.
And with car, it's 25 with the garage?
Yes.
Yeah.
It would have to be more if the house were at 25. The garage would have to be at 30, because it would still have to be 5 feet behind the plane of the principal structure. So again, it's trying to keep that principal structure being what is the main thing you see.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, all right, then that's, I have my questions answered, and we'll keep working on the design criteria language.
Perfect.
anything else?
We did offer
Comment.
public comment.
Comment.
Yes, I know, and that's next on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public in the audience this evening who are still awake? Anything that you would like to add to our discussion at this time?
Thank you, Jeremy Grimm. Yes, I have a lot to add. I thank you first and foremost for the edification of your decisions. I guess I'll start with just a bit of history on the ADUs. When I got here in 2007, ADUs were illegal throughout town. So we took an incremental approach to allowing them, and it was quite controversial. That's why we added the mirroring language. They need to mirror the primary home because that was the way to contend with the people who thought ADUs were going to destroy our community. So just for context, recognize how far we've come. Secondly, for those who haven't lived in Idaho long, let me remind you of what happened in 2000, I think it was 12, when we adopted the commercial design, which simply said you have to have glass storefront display windows and no tilt-up concrete. It made it onto the floor of the freaking state house to strip cities, this code, strip cities of the right under LUPA to have any design criteria at all. So when you start talking about colors and contrasting trim, like, just be aware, the pushback can be incredibly severe. Idaho is a freedom-loving state. This is a funky town, and be aware of what could potentially happen and what, I mean, you have, the council has the power to really like push things back or forward, and it has to happen incrementally. So A lot of people don't realize that that's how close we came to losing all health, safety, and welfare is what zoning allows. Design criteria, all that's fine if you have a historic district. Our neighborhoods are not a historic district. So when the Idaho legislature looks at the powers the city has under zoning, goes back to health, safety, and welfare. We all might want beautiful storybook towns, but frankly, that's not our history, and I hope it's not our future. So I really applaud your caution. It's really important that you proceed really cautiously on this. And I think you're talking about really important things. One other thing I'll throw out is the other thing is scale. It's not just height and size ADU, it's the scale of the lot. So we have the impervious surface and we have the building footprint. Now, we changed those to 40% for building footprint. You can change them, you can make them lower. You could basically, by doing that, ensure that the lot isn't overbuilt. So those are some other things. And finally, about the 25-foot from the street, if there's a garage door, that's for the cars to park. So the cars aren't blocking the street, they have room to park and put there. But keep up the good work. Thank you so much for your time. This is hours and hours and hours. It's, I understand what you and staff are all going through, and I really appreciate the effort you're putting in because it means a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. One last thing. Do you all get the PASS Planning Advisory Service booklets? You're not subscribed to that? Amy, do you subscribe? No. Is that a budget issue probably?
Just haven't ordered it.
So the APA makes a planning advisory service. It's a really wonderful monthly update. And I used to subscribe the planning commission to it, and you'd all get copies, and it talks about ADUs, it talks about street parking, it talks about bulk dimensioning, and it really, it consolidates all this research that folks are doing into a like really tight consensus 4-page pamphlet. And they're really great. You can go back and search any issue you've ever had. And if I'm lucky enough to become mayor, I'll make sure that you guys get subscriptions to that. Thanks.
All righty.
Just to clarify, we do still have a Zoom participant, so I would like to open the floor to them if they would
Oh,
like to
yes,
speak.
absolutely.
So if you are on Zoom and would like to speak on any of the the 2 last agenda items tonight, please raise your hand at this time. They have not risen their hands, so I don't believe they will speak in public
Okay.
comment.
Thank you. Well, then I would like to thank everybody who attended this evening, and with no further business before the commission, this meeting is now adjourned at 5:35. Oh, wait, no, it's later than that. It's later than that, isn't it? At 8:07. 8:07.
Nice.
Thanks, sir.